right, with that, we are ready for our next talk, and that is a incredible panel talking about all things clients for ETH2 and client diversity, which we know is a really important topic here. We have a lot of panelists for this one. So we have Superphiz from ETHStaker, we have Carl from Ethereum Foundation, we have dapplion from ChainSafe, and Evan Van Ness from the Week in Ethereum, and moderating this will be Ben, who is the product owner at Teku. I'll let Ben take over and ask all of our panelists to intro themselves. So without further ado, let's hear about client diversity. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you, Kardik, and good morning, good day, good evening, wherever you are, Ethereans. It's great to be here. We are missing one. I think Lion should be joining us shortly, but I don't see him yet. But let's do some intros. So I'll do myself first. I am proprietor of What's New in ETH2, which you can find at eth2.news. And as Kardik said, I am also product owner, product manager of the Teku ETH2 client, which I'm not representing Teku here today in this client diversity panel, but I hope that gives an interesting perspective. Evan, you're first on my screen.
Yes, I'm Evan Van Ness. I'm most famous for trying to cancel Ben for using the ETH2 nomenclature still. I also have a newsletter called Week in Ethereum News, and I've done stuff for a while. I guess that's my bio.
Thanks, Evan. Carl.
Hey everyone, I'm Carl Beek. I work as a researcher with the Ethereum Foundation on all things Ethereum consensus. Lately been doing a lot of fork choice stuff and yeah, caring a bit about client diversity.
Thanks, Carl. Hey, Superphiz.
Hey, so I'm Superphiz. I am probably like an old school miner, and with a couple of friends, I decided it would be a great idea to co-found a group called ETHStaker. And through ETHStaker, we promote involvement in the Beacon chain by normal people. And we work to be welcoming first and knowledgeable second.
Wonderful. We love ETHStaker. Lion, you made it. Say hi and give a quick introduction, please. I'm not hearing Lion.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
How about now?
It's good. Yes.
It's good.
Sorry. So yeah, I've been part of DAppNodes since 2018, OGDApp, helping make running nodes easier. And then when Ethereum 2 came, so making staking simple to non-technical people has been one of the mottos. And I'm also core dev in Lodestar. So it's awesome to see this space from both sides of the equation.
Great, thanks panel. So I'm going to start by setting the scene and then we'll get into some Q&A. So the context I want to begin with is the Ethereum 2 Beacon chain. So this is the proof of stake network that we've built. Today we have almost 250,000 stakes, which is 8 million Ether worth today. And this is staggering when I calculated earlier, $30 billion worth being managed by our ETH2 clients. And so these stakes, each one of these stakes is managed by a piece of client software from one of 5 teams, my own Teku, or Lion's Lodestar, or Lighthouse, or Nimbus, or Prism. And according to the best statistics that I've seen, this stake is quite unevenly distributed between these 5 clients. It looks something like Prism having between 60 and 64%, almost 2/3 of the stake staked on the Prism client. Lighthouse around 22%, Teku between 14 and 17.5%, and Nimbus and Lodestar each below 1%. And these numbers come from a new analysis by Michael Sproul from the Lighthouse team, which uses a really ingenious technique to kind of fingerprint clients according to the blocks they make. So to kind of get to the meat of the client diversity thing, so let me ask you first, Carl, There's been a lot of hand-wringing lately about this imbalance, this uneven split between clients on the network, in particular, this dominance of Prism. Why is this a problem? Why are we concerned about this?
So within any consensus mechanism, right? You have a set of people trying to agree on something, and by going down this road which we went for ETH2, we get one specification, and from this we built up many clients, and these many clients allowed us, at least in theory, to have a more robust network by having a failure in one client hopefully not affect the network as a whole, because they are one client would hopefully only have a small portion of the network, and we could contain that failure and hopefully fix that mistake. In theory, this is true and is in practice as well. But what we've had now is that Prism has, according to these statistics, become a really dominant client, and this means that the more and more nodes become convinced that what Prism says is the truth becomes the truth. And so in a world where we have more than 1/3 of the nodes in the system, so if even just with more than 33% Prism nodes or any client, if they have a bug or start disagreeing with the rest of the network, then we're going to stop finalizing blocks on ETH2. The chain will still make progress, but there will be this nice finality gadget which gives you economic security, economic guarantees of how transactions have gone, and that there will forever be a part of the Ethereum chain. That will no longer be guaranteed until a future date when we can get this 1/3 back online and following the canonical chain. So even more than 33% is not ideal. And so with the between 4 and 5 mainnet clients that we have at the moment, we should ideally have about 25% in each of these clients, which means it'd be below this threshold and life would be all dandy. This is further accentuated with sort of a second threshold we have, which is what we call a supermajority, which is where you have more than 2/3, the 66%, which according to the statistics Ben was digging into a bit earlier, where Prism is hovering just below. And what happens in this scenario if there is a bug in Prism, or Prism does, for whatever reason, start forking off or producing bad blocks, the Prism nodes themselves will think that it's the rest of the network, which looks like 1/3 from the Prism nodes perspective, that's making the mistake. And so the Prism nodes will happily go on and build a completely valid chain from their perspective. And this will progress on. And the result of this is that these Prism nodes have this, they have their economic finality sort of guaranteeing the wrong thing, which is not a part of the canonical chain, which is really scary. Instead of this failure mode where we have sort of one sort of degraded quality of the chain, but everything still progresses, we now have a problem where we need to go in at a sort of hard level and correct these Prism nodes. So that will require database corrections for the Prism nodes. We'll have some serious issues to avoid slashing conditions, because the Prism nodes will make votes on top of each other, which will have certain opinions about the chain, but that'll be incompatible with what the rest of the chain actually did, which would be the sort of correct chain. And so this is the sort of like kind of scary scenario where everything's gone off in one direction. And ideally this would never happen, and all those good things, but in practice we never know. And so I think we're at this like tipping point where anymore, and is going to be, if there is a fault, really hard to correct, not impossible to do so. We've seen chains do this in the past, but a correction to do that would look terrible and would give all your favorite maxis that you non-Ethereum maxis that you disagree with, give them a lot of ammunition for having to sort of go in and manually hard fork away from any quote unquote problems. So this is really what we're trying to avoid by preventing any node from getting to this 2/3 threshold.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the point is that once a client has finalized its own chain, so in this instance, Prism had made its own chain, recovering that and bringing all the clients back together again isn't a matter of a kind of fix the bug and move on. There's this slashing thing going on whereby they fundamentally disagree, and for either side to join the other chain means that a bunch of validators are going to get slashed, which is going to be horrifically expensive. So
Yeah.
this is a kind of new feature under proof of stake, which doesn't apply in proof of work, right? Proof of work, the chain splits, you just kind of fix a bug, network comes back together, we're back on the longest chain and everything's cool. Under proof of stake, it's really, really, really complicated to fix.
Yeah, and it's that's sort of a feature of this finality that we have, right? So it's a bug and a feature because we have the system where we can agree that this will forever be a part of the chain, this finality mechanism. If something goes wrong and we have something that we think is a part of the chain that's not, or there's disagreement about what is a part of the chain, and some people bake in incorrect ideas, that's really hard to get out of the system without these sort of financial guarantees we have triggering and slashing a lot of stake.
Cool. And just to be clear for everybody, we're not dunking on Prism here, where any client that has this super majority would be a problem in this scenario. It just so happens that Prism is the most used client. Evan, you are on record as saying that the long-awaited merge to proof of stake could be delayed unless we kind of sort out this client diversity issue, unless we have more evenness in the clients. Can you unpack that for us? Is that a genuine threat, or are you just whipping up some hysteria?
You want to mute a little bit early, so I missed the last part of your question. But look, I mean, we can't turn off proof of work until we can do it safely. And to do it safely, we need to have a client at a reasonable distribution share. You know, I think Carl said in a lot of words, something that I'm going to TLDR for people who are staking with Prism. If you are staking with Prism right now, your ETH is wildly at risk. And that has nothing to do with the quality of Prism's client or any other client. It has to do with the fact that the spec incentivizes decentralization. And right now you are not contributing to decentralization. It's the opposite. So let me say that as clearly as possible, because I actually get a lot of friends that when I tweet things, like slide into my DMs unhappy with me, telling me that like I'm the one that doesn't understand the spec. And I say like, no, you're the one that doesn't understand. You chose to stake with Prism. I understand you did a lot of Prism test nets and you are comfortable with it. But unfortunately, the spec is very clear that like decentralization matters and you are not contributing to decentralization. And so your ETH is at risk. So, and you know, we've sort of talked about, like Carl talked about 1/3 and 2/3, and those are obviously the important thresholds, but it's even there's some thresholds that make a little bit that are important as well, which is to say that, you know, if we lose finality and Prism has 49%, you're going to get slashed, or you're going to lose from the inactivity leak, which it grows exponentially. You are going to lose a lot less if Prism is under half of the staking clients. Whereas if Prism is 65%, you're going to lose, I mean, depending on the circumstances, a lot, maybe half, maybe all, you know. People get upset when I say this, but I don't know, I'm just stating obvious facts. So to do it safely, to turn off proof of work safely, which is a long time goal of Ethereum, we need better client diversity.
Anyone want to comment on that, or we can leave it for pick up a bit later? Go on, Fizz.
You're right about a lot. If we lose finality, Prism clients could be slashed. Absolutely true. But we need to acknowledge that that is currently a low risk event. And I do think it's very important for people who are on Prism to consider using minority clients, especially Nimbus right now. But if we use scare tactics, if we make our user base afraid of the chain, then they're going to be afraid to interact with the chain. rather, I think education and promoting the ideas that why we need client diversity, using the right tools for the job, getting people to say, I may need to change validator clients a few times, and I'm okay with that, is much better than the scare tactic of saying, get away from Prism or you're going to get slashed. Because what we have then is a reflexive action where Prism is vilified, where people start trashing Prism and saying terrible things about it to get other users away from it. And what's likely to happen is others will go to Lighthouse, and then we will have Lighthouse with a supermajority. The only way to get away from it then is to trash Lighthouse. So rather than this this fear mongering, and no, that's not fair, Evan. You're not fear mongering. I think you're stating a very possible scenario. I really do believe, though, that education is the best way to get people to make these informed decisions. And rather than reflexively doing everything we can as quickly as possible to get people off of Prism, we develop these multi-client tools. We develop quick switch tools so that home users aren't intimidated. They're not afraid of losing their stake, but instead they can click 2 buttons, let it happen. And they feel empowered. They're supporting the network, and they're not operating out of fear. I think that our big difference would probably be that I believe education is the way to reach our goal. And you might be more willing to hit people with what you would call the hard reality, that they're going to be slashed. And I recognize that potential, but I think the likelihood is low.
So you say the fear of them switching clients is that they would lose. I mean, so I think that's something that we can talk about. Should people be afraid of that? If you take your client offline and you have the slashing protection database for a day, and then you come back up with another client, I haven't done it because I run minority clients, but I'm pretty sure that is like a pretty much 100% no risk scenario. Yeah. We can talk about that later. However, I mean, so if there's that fear, okay, that's a fear. It's a amorphous fear. However, there is a very concrete fear, which Prism stakers do not seem to have currently, which they should have, which is that if Prism has a bug, then the network will lose finality, and we're in a bad spot, and the inactivity leak will start melting away their stake, and that is something that they probably should be afraid of. They should at least understand it and be cognizant of the fact that is a risk that they are taking.
We have this really neat thing in ETHStaker where we have a lot of first-time validators, first-time stakers, people who it's their first time engaging with a network in any real way. And so they found guides, they found the CoinCashew guide or Samarasat's guide, and they installed Prism, and I'm proud of them. They did a great job. They are participating with the network. I think it's just so important that we continue to meet them where they are, rather than stand on our high horse and make these bold demands of what they should do, when they are our user base, they are our network. And
so since I want to get to dapplion, but since you got the mic, Fizz, and this is relevant, we're focused in the recent answers on the current solo stakers on the network. Are they the key to turning around client diversity? Who is responsible for making this happen? What's the route from where we are to where we need to get to?
That's a great question. In my mind, there are a couple different ways to look at this. I think that we do need to look at institutional stakers, and after some conversations with leaders from the EF, I feel confident that that outreach is being done. But what I can focus on is my scope, and my scope is the home users. And while I do encourage them to switch clients, I really feel like there's a development gap or a software gap there, where I don't know if deserve is the right word, but what the community should offer them are these graphical tools, these easy switch tools, where they don't have to put their stake out on a limb to hope that they're switching right to support the network. Because our users generally have two concerns. they have a large investment and they want to support the chain in the community. I value both of those things, and I don't put either one of them ahead of the other. And so what we need to do to reach them, and Colfax through Steakhouse is working on these tools. I know there are other efforts working on these, is to take the existing implementations and put wrappers around them or interfaces with them so that users can go to a web interface, they can see their stats, and hopefully in a few months, they'll be able to select a dropdown that says switch from Prism to Teku. And yes, I did it. I saw you there. And so when we have that functionality, I think the users, they'll feel supported. They're not going to lose their stake, and supporting the network will be within reach. So what we need from the wider community is more support on this effort. We need money, we need developers, we need thinkers to kind of put as much effort into this easy switching as we've put into some other very important things.
Cool.
Yeah,
there are other things to consider. There's the majority of stakers are not on the network yet. I mean, I think probably we're about a quarter of the way there, maybe, to the total stake. So if everyone in future adopts a minority client, that could correct things. And the majority of stake on the network is actually managed by staking services, institutionals, stakers. And again, I think, you know, they will have the most influence. I love the army of solo stakers. I am one. For the record, I run a minority client. But, you know, I'm
Which
not
client
sure.
do you run, Ben?
you can guess. But maybe that's the solo stakers. It's kind of unfair to pressure them too much, because actually, you know, they're not going to move the needle a huge amount. And it's really others who need to take responsibility, the professionals, right?
yes.
I want to be
and
really
no.
careful about that. That disempowers them. They are an empowered group. And so I think that we're about 40% of unidentified validators. And that, I know that there are some whales in there, but a lot of that are home stakers. And so a lot of the responsibility is institutions, but let's not disempower those home stakers and say that nothing you do matters, because it does matter. One person switching is going to move that needle one hair, and that matters. One person from Prism to Nimbus, it does matter. At least I think we need to believe that, and we need to act on that, because that's the health of the network. I call myself the Beacon Chain Health Consultant, if you don't know that. So.
Nice answer. Yeah, go on, Carl.
Yeah, so I think it exists at multiple levels. So absolutely, the easiest way to sway it is to go to your favorite big institution. If they're running a majority client, we speak to them and try to get them to diversify a bit. That's moves the needle a bunch. But everyone has a role to play in this and contributes to the overall distribution, which is what we care about. We also don't want a scenario where the big institutions run one set of clients and solo or private validators run another set, because then if we have faults, now we're starting to get like splits in our community between the individuals and institutions, which is also not a great thing to have. And I also think, like, your role as a staker, part of it is to be worried about these kinds of things, right? To observe that you have reasonable uptime, and that you are picking a client that's not completely dominating the network. These are important roles, and it is literally what you're paid to do, right? This is the reason you earn rewards back, right? Is to do this safely and securely, to improve the decentralization. All these things are important, and part of all of this is to choose reasonable clients. And so you don't have to do it all the time. Don't panic about it. Don't change things if you're not comfortable, but at least spend some time thinking about it. And if you do feel like you have the capacity to change away from a majority client, I really think you should consider doing so.
Great answer. Yeah, a couple of points I hadn't thought of. Love it. Lion, you've been very patient. You're a client dev. What do we client devs need to do to promote client diversity?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, Prism has done a fantastic job, and that's why they are killing it. I mean, it's obvious. All the clients should see what they are doing, why they are killing it, and why people love them. Like they clearly said, graphical interface, and Windows support. That's it. If everyone does that, then it would be much easier. And as everyone has said, easy switching, standardization, that's the key. Another point is that people like DEF or whoever has access to these tools should see what's the funnel of going into staking. Why do people choose Prism? There has been people saying, oh, because it looked cool. Okay, but where were you looking at? Is there any resource that can actually provide this information that, hey, there are more clients, just go pick those ones because reasons. So yeah, I think those are the key things that we should work on.
Yeah, I think one of the issues up to now is we haven't really had good data on client diversity. We've had sort of some guesses, some bad data. It's very hard to get good stats. These stats that Michael has produced are a game changer, I think.
Yeah, but we will probably never, ever have actual data. That's a worrying thing. Like in reality, Prism could be a minority client and we just don't know.
Well, we have that, the great the Michael Sproul data. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so a few things. One is this is partly by design, right? Part of having a robust, secure, anonymous, well, pseudo-anonymous network is that it is hard to extract this data, right? It's not here's the sign-up sheet. Put your name and address, and we'll find out how to do all of that. That's not how any of this works. And it's part of what makes it so hard for us to have this data. And as much as we want it to help explain things, we also don't really want to have to like bake this in because it exposes individuals. And so we work very hard to avoid that as well. And it's not that we're like not looking. You can look very hard. This tool that everyone keeps talking about, Michael Sproul's thing is like really some very ingenious stuff to try extract it. You probably can't do too much better, which I think is like a really cool thing because it shows that we have actually built a robust network. So it's like trade-offs that exist here. That we have other data sources. There's sort of we have node trackers. There are a few that have been built out. There's the ETH Staker survey, which Superphiz has been very involved in, and there's some interesting data. Watch out for some interesting alpha that's going to come out of that soonish. Yeah, so there is data. There's just not so obvious.
Sometimes we only find out when the things go wrong, right? I mean, we knew back in February when what Prism share of the network was when all their clients simultaneously stopped producing blocks. So it was like 70% at that time. So we're moving in the right direction. Evan, you unmuted.
Yes, I unmuted to say exactly that. We actually did know how much the Prism has in the network as of last time there was an issue.
Well, and we have seen some evidence of migration. It has just been slow evidence, slow migration. And one of the reasons I have delayed pushing client diversity harder is because we can't really see the needle. When we can see a very clear representation of these proposals and know exactly where we're at, then we can measure progress and we can know what initiatives are successful and what aren't. Can I talk for a minute about Prism and how they became successful?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
So Prism is successful. I think this is opinion, but it's also based in experience and fact. Prism is the only client that has a native Windows installer. And a large part of the user base is Windows centric. They're not ready for Linux. They don't want to secure shell into a server. And so that's a big boom. Another thing is that they have provided 24/7 support in their Discord since like the Topaz testnet. And so they were doing these public testnets. We were giving POAPs out for them. We were holding launch calls. And I feel strongly they were doing this work to promote the beacon chain. But what ended up happening was rather than simply promoting the beacon chain, it created this Prism allegiance, which, it is what it is, but I don't think that was intentional on their part. They were trying to promote growth of the community.
They did
those two things.
Well.
They did. And it's not that anyone else didn't do their job. It's that they hit on two really successful ideas. And that's also a great, we onboarded a lot of home stakers by helping them feel comfortable through all those test nets. And we wouldn't have, we can complain about Prism dominance, but we also have this really strong base of home stakers that might not exist if it weren't for Prism's engagement.
Yeah, they were first by a long way. And I think that really established the name recognition, and they did a terrific job. I mean, really awesome. What has surprised me is how the institutional stakers have just followed exactly the same patterns.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Ben, you guys didn't do your job well. What happened?
yeah, the background to that. Okay, first thing, just come back on Fizz. Teku runs just fine on Windows. You have to install Java, but it's not too much of a lift. Yeah, Teku, the client aimed at institutional stakers. Guys, come on, why are you not using it? This would, a few large institutions adopting Teku would really balance things out more. I mean, the real interesting questions are around Nimbus, Lodestar, where the plans are. So this brings us, I mean, Lion, when I asked you about what client devs can do, you framed the response in terms of this effectively, I'm going to paraphrase you here in a way you won't like, but make all the clients the same. Same interfaces, same experience for users, just drop in replacements for each other. We've taken a different approach with Teku. We've said, no, we are not going to address certain parts of the market. We are the client of choice for institutional stakers. To an extent, Nimbus has targeted a group, the low-powered constrained device market. Lodestar itself, you're looking at light clients in browser, this kind of thing. Devil's advocate here, but maybe a different route to diversity is really to double down on specific use cases for each client rather than everybody try to be the same. Any thoughts?
It hasn't worked out that well, right? Everyone's specializing. Teku, Nimbus, and as we are at the bottom of the list. And it's, I mean, at the end, it's a very specific use case. So while the specialization, it makes sense, if you are just going to go out for stakers, I don't think it makes that much sense. In our case, our libraries are widely used on browsers and other types of applications, and we try to make our node kind of the backbone of light clients as a hopefully future replacement of Infura. But that's kind of a parallel effort, people just staking right now. And the same for Nimbus. I mean, you cannot just put a node on the phone yet, and you will still just run it on a machine as you would for anyone else. So, and you can do both. Like we can still follow standards and be special. And I mean, if you want to migrate somehow, you still need the standard.
So I think some of this definitely comes down to just being early, right? The need for light clients is much less until we really have the economic value attached to the proof of stake chain, right? Post merge, light clients going to be a lot more interesting. Having stuff that compiles well down to mobile devices is going to be fantastic. And like there are multiple ways to improve security and diversity of a chain, right? You can be a validator, which is what we've been focusing on today. But you can also just run a node that helps everyone, right? And has you now have your own source of truth. So this is another way we can help improve the network. And then once that starts happening, we may see people starting to care a little bit more about having a super lightweight client they can throw on in the background on one of their other machines or something like that. So I think some of these specialization use cases, we just sort of haven't really reached that point yet, which I'm excited to see. And then the other thing I think that ties in a bit to Teku and what we were talking about earlier, and that's some of the discussions that I've been involved in with these institutions have been rather like scary considering how large they are. And that's just that they didn't really do any research. They just didn't look. Hey, we see everyone's like, we heard the word Prism a lot, must be good. Cool, let's go. It's honestly been that bad. And sort of you'd expect based on the haircut they take off staking rewards that they would care about these things and that they would care about client diversity. But in the cases of some of these institutions, that's just simply not true. They didn't put in the time to do the research, and they're not really worried about uptime. It's just like an extra service they happen to provide and pulls in money for them. It's not the approach was sort of money first and improving a network second, and like overall they didn't even consider the incentives of the network they're participating in, which is ultimately like bad for them as well, because as Evan was saying earlier, like you don't want to be running a majority client in these scenarios. It's strictly worse for you. So I think they need to consider some of these things a bit more.
There's a name for that. It's called negligence.
Well,
honestly, I agree.
Are entirely negligent, and I
put
say
a
this
counter
very seriously.
Let me put a counter to you about that, which is very relevant, which is actually, you could call it completely rational behavior. And the thinking goes like this, and I suspect there's a lot of thinking out there. We will adopt the majority clients because it's too big to fail. No, so if Prism fails, 60, 70% of the network gets into a mess. Of course, they're going to get bailed out. I mean, obviously, they're going to get bailed out. We're not going to let the beacon chain go down over this. So they'll be bailed out. If they were running like a 5% client or a 10% client, then they're taking a risk because nobody's going to bail them out if there's a horrible bug, right? Completely rational. What's wrong with that reasoning? How are we going to push back against that?
The network doesn't have to go down. And if you use common sense and exercise that diversity, then you ameliorate the risk of that network going down and slashing and needing to be compensated because it doesn't exist. So in game theory, it makes better sense for them to choose a minority client to prevent an outage that they would need to be compensated for or want to be compensated for. But Carl said something that really interests me. I don't think these institutional stakers care. They are not focused on ETH. They don't care about our ecosystem. They don't care about our growth, development, transactions, any of that. They're there to make money. And the least amount of money that they can put into this to make a return is what they're going to do. It's one of the reasons I really encourage users not to stake with those institutions. They don't care about what we're doing. They're there to make money. And so the best thing that we can do is either solo stake or stake with a trustless, open, decentralized solution. Not give your money to the big exchanges.
And again, this is gross negligence. I think this cannot be repeated enough because staking pools, especially say public companies in the United States or anybody that has a nexus to the United States, given the United States court system loves to try to enforce its will on the world, is if a staking service loses their client's ETH and gets a massive inactivity leak or gets slashed, I don't think that whatever legal language they have in their contract is going to protect them from the fact that they were willfully, grossly negligent. And so, eventually, they're hopefully going to figure this out. The question is whether Ethereum loses finality and pulls a mini Solana, not a real Solana, because they went completely down.
Go on, Carl.
I think there are a few interesting things to explore here. One is that there's a failure spectrum as well. We've been talking a lot about the worst case scenario where there's a catastrophic bug and everyone gets slashed. That is very, very unlikely. These clients are coded incredibly well. They've been battle tested through multiple test nets. We've had excellent bug bounties which have found things, but haven't not lately. We've had audits for everyone. These and like it's an open source ecosystem, so many eyes on all of these clients. So that really helps out for all of this. But there are other more subtle failures which can cause temporary failures of liveness for so certain the majority client could stop producing attestations, which is not like a hard fork, but it does mean we're now going to start having to leak the balances of those clients. And I think if there's a more subtle failure, then we may not bail everyone out because that's not so easy to do at a layer. And I think Ethereum, like as much as we can have the debate, Ethereum's had in the past we have made decisions to handle the whole DAO situation, right? And we've seen the blowback from all of that, in spite of what. Okay, we can get let's not get into that now, but relative to that, I think we will bias a lot towards not going in that direction, even if it causes loss of value for a lot of people. And I think another interesting thing is a bit to what I was saying is you can end up in the scenario where there's a split between the institutions and private individuals. And if we start seeing that, where sort of private individuals are running minority clients and have really worked to diversify, and institutions are focusing on a majority client because easy and negligent and whatever, it's going to be very hard to convince the entire ecosystem to want to bail out the institutions, because they didn't care about and don't care about the Ethereum ecosystem in general. And so why should the community care about bailing out their ETH?
Please, let's talk about the bailout scenario. It's fascinating. I don't believe we should bail out anyone, to be honest. And
Absolutely
so,
not.
see why it's actually necessary. Like, seriously, if there is a bug and the network splits, the minority network would either leak everyone or expect everyone to get slashed. But the network could continue. It will still include execution data, but it will not be finalized. So if people accept the non-finality and the risk of reorgs, which is what we actually have today, the network could just move on.
It
So
depends.
why do
Who
you think-
who decides which is the right network? I mean, you got, say, 70% of stake on a Prism only network that's forked off due to a consensus bug, and you got the rest of the stake on the other clients, which is not yet finalizing, but eventually will due to the inactivity leak. Which is the right network? You've got two completely separate networks now.
We have a spec.
Well, it's not the first time that happened
You're
in
a spec.
Ethereum, right?
Evan's a spec maximalist. Yeah, but we haven't
can
had
do-
finality in Ethereum before. This is new, right? So
No,
two
but
chains that are fundamentally incompatible.
I agree with Evan on this, right? We have a definition of what it means to be compliant with the Ethereum chain. So I think the clients that have followed the specifications have, by definition, they have the canonical chain. Whether or not it's finalized via something that's outside of the definition of what literally is Ethereum, that's irrelevant. But I do think there's like the failure, that like terrifying failure mode where there's a fork off and the result is everyone's going to get slashed, and it's a super majority, right? Greater than 2/3. I think it's unrealistic to expect that not to be bailed out. As much as I hate to admit that, it is just so much value that I think it would be, at least the discussion would be very intense, but I think we'd ultimately settle on merging that back in, possibly with financial penalties, and we can get into what exactly that looks like. But I think it's unrealistic to expect that just to burn all that money and pretend we're all good without it.
To be fair, your hypothetical is not the case of what we are experiencing today, where we do not have a supermajority. We might be somewhat close to having a supermajority, but we don't have one.
Yeah.
So
It very quickly becomes a super. It very quickly becomes a supermajority, Evan, because of the way the chains are constructed. So let's say Prism's got 63%. There's a consensus bug. They end up on a chain where their validators are proposing blocks and attestations, but nobody else is. Everybody else will very quickly get their balance leaked away, and it will only be a matter of days before Prism's got 66% and finalizes. The closer they are to that 66% threshold, the less time we've got to fix it. And it takes at least a day, maybe two or more, to get a fix out. So there's a real gun against the head in that scenario. The further from a supermajority, 66%, the below that, the better.
That
takes me to
saying earlier. That's why we can't turn it off safely, turn off proof of work safely until we are lower than where we are now. And so it's this theoretical 2/3, threshold. But
in a month, we could have Prism below 50%. Prism could easily be below 50% in a month. It doesn't. Yeah. It's not an act of Congress. It really just takes a concerted push by everyone in the community to say, we have to do this now. We're not messing around anymore. Everyone work together. And I don't mean to be kumbaya, but I'm just saying it's not that difficult to make it happen if we just all push in the same direction for a moment. In a month, this could be a non-issue.
I've been trying for over a year. I think
you have been trying, and I have been trying, buddy. We're together, but I'm saying
it's not that easy.
Because it's a few voices. It's a few voices shouting in the woods. it's not everyone working together. And we have that potential as a community to move together.
Guys,
I think
don't
that's
you
one
see,
thing.
like if we don't bail out and we burn half of the supply, that would be like the most ultrasound money thing we could do, like the ultimate meme. Like IEP $159 would be.
Hey, so
much money.
There's a great comment about incentives. And so one of the reasons I was so excited about Michael Sproul's data is that we can identify by proposal what client someone is running. And that gives us the opportunity to take a snapshot and say, today we know what you're running. And if you change from Prism to Nimbus, then we can offer you a POAP, and those POAPs can be incentivized. I personally, I feel like it's still a great idea. It didn't, some of the thought leaders didn't really love it, but it's worth considering or talking about incentives for people who change from not necessarily money directly, but incentives for people who change from the majority to a minority client.
But yeah, making it
We already
provable
have
is
that
the
incentive.
yeah.
That
Go on.
incentive exists
not getting
already.
slashed?
And like,
Not getting slashed? Is that?
it's a real thing, and nobody cares. I mean, and frankly, like nobody believes me when I say it. I mean, I have to tell you that, like, I talked to the staking pools over the last 15 to 18 months. They all think that we're a data center chain, just like every other, DPoS, POS, basically the same chain.
I think that is like as much as I was shitting on institutions earlier, I do think we're making like some of the right moves in that direction, right? We've opened up some discussions with them, and they've acknowledged that the approach they took was wrong, and that they will try dig into this and diversify a bit there. I've been really excited to see if you go on Reddit and like, or on ETHStaker and be like, hey, I'm having this problem with Prism, help set me up. You will get sort of ratioed out by people shouting at you to pick any other client, please just not Prism. So
they better not shout. They better be friendly. Sorry.
That's true. But in all seriousness, I think we're like reaching a point where it becomes very possible to see this change happening rather quickly, away from these clients. And I think there's a lot of awareness, certainly in the Ethereum community, due to the thought leaders shouting about this for a long time and complaining about this for a long time, and working with these institutions to like try help them diversify and see the errors on their ways, even if they don't majorly care for our own good.
Right, I'm going to change tack slightly on an optimistic note. Have you got something optimistic to say, Evan?
Well, I wanted to say that, like, my understanding from staking pools is that they have sort of seen the light, and that they now spin up non-Prism clients, but they have not switched all of their validators from before they saw the light. And I think most of them probably, I think there's probably some fear. I think a lot of it is also they just don't understand that there's no real loss for taking their entire validators down for a day. And, they're worried about justifying their services to people and, losing their penalties. And I think they really just don't understand the risks that they're taking.
Or they don't care.
No, I think it's like I said, I mean, I think that, if they realize that they could get sued, for not just possibly like the loss of the entire, whatever happens in this, in a bad scenario, but maybe even something punitive. Like, I mean,
well, like Carl says,
to make money, not to lose.
I think Carl hit the nail on the head. They know they believe they'll get bailed out. And they might be right. I don't agree with that. Even though I support home stakers, I don't promote a bailout of anyone who gets slashed. When you signed up as a validator, you accepted the terms, and you know the terms. If you make poor decisions, if you get slashed, and I hope everyone from ETHStaker hears this, you accepted the risks. You need to make better choices. If you get slashed, it's on you.
I mean, I'm concerned about
Ethereum. This is why it's secure. Why, like, we designed the system particularly in this way. It's necessary and makes it better for everyone.
I mean, personally, I have to say that having listened to this panel, I all of a sudden am worried about a bailout, whereas I never was before. So I think that, like, the message isn't even clear from this panel. I mean, I am 100% against a bailout. Like, I will probably sell all my ETH and quit if we bail stakers out who did the wrong thing and were pushing for centralization the entire time. I mean, it's absolutely wrong. You have a responsibility. It's what you're getting paid for. if you're going to get paid to get the rewards, you have to realize the risks you're taking.
I'm going to move us on. I'm going to move us on. Let's say that everyone listening does the right thing and that we get all this sorted out, and in 6 months' time we're at like 25% on each client and it's all rosy, and then we do the merge. I looked at ETHOnodes today. Geth is at like 63% of the network. Sounds familiar, right? Is that going to be a problem post-merge? Is there an issue on the execution engine, as it will be, the ETH1 client side? Is that an issue for client diversity as well? And do we need to get that more even? What do you think?
Yeah, I think what's really annoying is that at least in consensus, there has been so much effort and money and talent spent at creating 4 clients that are almost equal in capabilities, and still we don't achieve diversity. In Ethereum 1, you can say, okay, there is only one client that has all the longevity and features, and there is another one that's going away and others that coming in, but there is no equal to Geth in a way. And still in consensus, we don't have the diversity. So yeah, just wondering how the hell we are going to achieve that in execution.
Yeah. So Carl, I'm interested, is it actually a problem having not the same level of diversity amongst the execution engine side of things, or is that, or is it just as critical as on the beacon chain side of things?
So, I mean, ultimately we can run into a similar diverging situation if certain if we have a supermajority and it goes off in one direction, we can run into all these terrifying things we were talking about earlier. But I think we got a few things counter against it. One is that this code has been running for very, very, very long, and like all these clients really have been around the block, and they've been tested by crazy amounts of value locked up on the Ethereum system. So I think that really helps us handle that. The other thing is that you start having these pairings between the execution client and the consensus client, and if you end up, like, from all the pairwise combinations, you end up with way more possibilities of you can run this execution client and this consensus client, and the result of this means that overall each individual pair sort of counts as a different way to fail in this regard, and so this starts helping us like build up a bit more resilience against these kind of mistakes, and so I'm a little bit less worried about it on that side, although more diversity is always better in this regard. And I think another interesting thing to like just quickly point out for everyone listening here, Ethereum, like, we are unbelievable in terms of diversity, even with supermajorities. No other chain comes even freaking close. Like, go try find an alternative client for any of the top 10, right? Bitcoin, you'll find a few. Any of the others, there are no other viable clients. No one else has anything.
This kind of brings me to my kind of final question, Carl. Perfect segue, which is this, and we haven't got time because there's a couple of audience questions we'd like to cover, but it's a big one. Was client diversity a mistake? As you say, I mean, no other chain. Bitcoin doesn't have it. No other chain I've come across sweats this at all. They're quite happy with their monoculture. Why in Ethereum are we bearing this burden, which is so complex?
Because we care about having the most robust chain and the most decentralization. It is strictly better to be more diverse. We want to be the best chain on pretty much any metric that this community cares about, and this is one of the really important ways of achieving that. And I think not having a diversity of implementations only serves to weaken you. I really don't see the downsides.
No capture of governance by core devs, like say an orange meme
Yeah.
coin.
That's and I was going to make a comment about another chain, decided not to. Hey, can I shoot one thing in here? It's been itching at me just a little bit, and that is this the specialization thing. And I know some of you are fans of client specialization. I really think that we should avoid client specialization in the long run, because that means that conglomerates form to kind of tribalize clients. And while it works for a little while, I think in the long run, that kind of tribalization, specialization is probably not healthy for the network. Rather, we should all look at all of the clients and seek to balance rather than picking one that is made for us. Just a thought.
Lion, any closing thought before we move on to audience questions?
Yeah, Lodestar is production ready. Lodestar is production ready. Go try it now. Link in the description. Subscribe.
Nice one.
On that note, you can run multiple clients, right? Don't run multiple validators at the same time, but you can run multiple beacon nodes. You don't only have to run one. You can have multiple easy backups, all those wonderful things. Don't run multiple beacon nodes, validators.
Good warning. All right, thank you, Kartik. Thank you, panelists. Let's move, Kartik, if you have some audience questions.
Yeah, that
would be great.
Probably one of the best discussions we've had. This is getting people excited. I think briefly, I think they might still be there. The Prism team is on the chat, also commenting. This is a question from Danny Ryan. I know we've kind of talked about the problem, and I feel like we'll kind of get to sort of statements here. What distribution of the various projects do you think is actually realistic? Like, what would satisfy each of you to say this is sufficiently diverse and like we can agree that this is not a super majority?
I think. Can you ask that in two though? Can you ask preferred and launchable, because that's two different questions? But
I mean, preferred is everyone at 20%, and launchable is under 50%. And frankly, like the Prismatic guys are heroes. And, you know, I think, you know, as well as the GAF team, I mean, they get it. They understand that client diversity matters. I mean, imagine how you're going to feel if, like, bugs are inevitable. And, like, you know, and any client, look at Geth, which is a very hardened piece of client software over, you know, 5 or 6, 7 years now. And I know the network launched, but it existed before the network launched. And, you know, we still have had, you know, security updates that could have caused forks at least twice. I want to say 3 or 4 times in the last year. You know, if I'm a Prismatic developer and I literally am like living and breathing my client and I've done an amazing job, I have a lot of people using it, I don't want to see my people get staked, because frankly, like, they might turn on me and I don't want that. I mean, that would like, how would I feel then? It would be awful. I mean, those guys are heroes and they should be recognized as such. And I would hate to see something happen where, you know, people turn against them.
Seconded.
Yeah. I would go 30, 30, 20, 10, and 10.
And your reasoning?
Oh.
It's good and it's realistic. It's not like 2020, 2020. That's not realistic.
Yeah. I actually align with Evan. I believe for launch, well, I align with him mostly. We are below 66% for Prism. I believe that we need to safely be below 50%, close to 50%, nearing 50% for launch. And below that, I'm not sure it matters so much what the other diversity is. But I do, Prism, we should have the opportunity to celebrate them so much more than we do. But instead it is all reserved because we're trying to increase client diversity. And so it's mutated. Like we should be singing their praises, but instead we have to say, well, there is Prism, but you really should choose something else. So congrats to the Prism team. Congrats to all the clients for developing a valuable product that supports our network.
By the way, I have a tweet storm about, you know, we found 2 bugs in Go language in the past year in Ethereum, right? So like, even the fact that like Prism and Geth and Aragon are all in Go is like, you know, it's a problem. I mean, stuff could happen. Like, we could talk about crazy scenarios, and you know what? Like, I think Bitcoiners are gonna be, well, just everyone, like when we turn off proof of work, they are going to be gunning to find every single little thing, just like the DAO in 2016. I mean, like, the amount of people that just want to watch the world burn by finding a bug is huge. And if they can find something by like fuzzing the heck out of Golang, and they find something little and they figure out how to exploit it, like, they will try. So, you know.
And they're not wrong for doing
language. Use a Puma language like Java.
Can never be a bug in JVM. Of course, everybody knows. I'll kind of blend a couple other questions in, and it's okay if we go a couple minutes over time because the next speaker has graciously agreed to enjoy this discussion with all of us. What have we tried as incentives instead of other than just shouting? and should there be incentives? Maybe that's probably a better way of phrasing that.
The only person that shouts is me.
I didn't want to say it directly, but yeah.
Yeah, so there are incentives, right? So, well, the incentives are the risk. You run more risk by running the supermajority client. And the problem with risk is that people are not sensitized to risk. They're not considering the everything goes wrong scenario. So when people make lazy choices, they don't see this. The only other incentive that works, in my experience, is a POAP. So, you know, people will do anything for a POAP. Yeah, if we can find a way to make that work.
Yeah, we have the mechanics for that. What we really need is just community agreement that it's the direction we want to go in. And I really think when that happens, hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll start seeing a sea change of people, like Ben said, people will do anything for a POAP. It's not a bad idea.
Even cheating.
Yeah, well, and so we've thought about the mechanics to prevent cheating. We have proposal data, and essentially what you would need to do is have a history of proposing on Prism, and then a future of proposing using a minority client. That's extremely I don't believe it's cheatable, but we'll have to see.
Go ahead, Carl. Seems like you were gonna say something. If not, I may have another question.
Nope, dig into your next question.
Got it. So I think, Carl, you actually talked about one of the reasons kind of multi-operating system support kind of helps with diversity, and we kind of talked about having a Windows client is actually essential, but you also vouch for individuals instead of institutions kind of having enough power to make this happen. So this question comes from Jeff, and his question is, what do you think specifically we need to maybe get more people excited about having all the other clients been supported on DAppNode so they can kind of run that on their own and maybe increase the pool of people who can easily run their own instances?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I think it's kind of sad that we haven't seen DAppNode supporting other people. There's like promises to change that, and I think we'll get there. But we're not there right now, and unfortunately that means that a lot of people have defaulted towards that. Windows support is much less of an issue now. There are multiple clients that support Windows, but that was an issue in the past. So I think all these things sort of like have changed, but I think people have been rather sticky in the client. Like once you set up, they don't want to touch it. I've spoken to a bunch of people who found it a rather stressful experience and a complicated experience. I know it took me many hours, and like it's my full-time job. I wrote a bunch of the specs. I know what's up. It took me many hours still to configure my personal setup. So I know the effort that goes into these things. But I also want to like stress that you already understand, like if you've set up any client, you already understand a lot of the things that are going on. It's the same core ideas. There are still beacon nodes and validator clients. If everyone uses this terminology, these setups work like this. You're still going to be looking at opening and closing ports. All those things that you did in the past. If you ever want to switch clients, you're not starting from scratch. It won't be as bad as what you had to do before. And it's rather easy to set up. And I think that the other thing, which I don't think we touched on yet, a little tangential, and that's that all the clients are profitable. You're not making any, like, there's no measurable difference really in terms of which client you're picking into for moving forward. All the clients seem to be like getting. Prism's not going to get you high rewards, absolutely not. And particularly if you can calculate the expected value for the Prism failure, Prism's probably the worst client to pick in terms of your overall value you can have as a staker.
Yeah, and you reminded me in this question, I'm not going to talk about rewards, I've tweeted about that enough. You reminded me in this question, it's not just about client diversity, and my bad, we should have covered this. There's also stuff like if everyone runs on AWS, this is equally a problem. AWS goes down, we have exactly the same issues. Everyone runs on one same operating system that has some fatal bug, then that's going to be a problem. So we need to think about diversity in all things.
Right. Well, we'll make the final question hopefully optimistic. 12 months from now, what is everybody's prediction on client diversity and what it will look like? We can start with Evan.
I think we're gonna do good. I think we're gonna do good.
I'm not optimistic about it, quite honestly. I mean, I think this is an emergency. It's the most important pressing problem in Ethereum. And I'm the only one that's been talking about it for 15 to 18 months. And I'm tired of talking about it because I feel like I'm out on my own shouting into the void, and like nobody really, amplifies my message. And because of that, like even my friends that are hardcore and Ethereum enthusiasts are in my DMs telling me that I'm a fudder. And like, it's very frustrating for me personally. I feel like our message is very muddled. And so like, if you ask me honestly, I'm not very optimistic about it.
I'm a lot more optimistic. As I say, I think we're starting to see an inflection point where like we've seen people in the community start to be louder about this, in contact with some of these institutions who are promising to make changes. And like I think it's sad that Evan feels he's on his own here. I don't think that's entirely true, but like I'll happily give you this. You'd definitely be beating the drum on this for a very long time. And like strongly agree, it is very important for the safety future of Ethereum, and like very much want this to happen and to have more diversity. But like I also don't think like Ethereum's not going to blow up. We have really robust clients. Even if it was 100% Prism, it would still be, we still have a very good system. So don't want to overfund it, but like it is a very important issue to be concerned of, one of the biggest in the space.
Evan, you are definitely not alone. I have been shouting the same thing you've been shouting from a different perspective. And I know that Carl is working in the same. We come from different angles. I am an encourager and you are using a slightly different tactic, but we align. I think that in a year,
everybody wants to be a good cop.
I like being a good cop. In a year, I think that we're going to have easy switching tools, and I think people will identify less with a client and more as a staker. And with that goal achieved, people will have those interfaces looking at Stakehouse to develop something like this, where they can click a button and say, yesterday I was Prism and today I am Lighthouse. And I think then people will identify as stakers, and the ecosystem will be much more vibrant.
I think that's a perfect note to end this. I want to thank Carl, Lion, Fizz, Evan for being an amazing panelist, and Ben, thank you for facilitating this entire discussion. This was absolutely incredible. And if in the future there's ever a bailout conversation, we'll be sure to live stream it on ETH Global and make sure you're all on the other side of this. But thanks again, everybody, and really appreciate you coming on and being part of this discussion.
Thanks, Kartik. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
For sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.